Yo, what up? How's it going, everyone? Kermode here, back with another tutorial. As you can see, I'm not in my regular studio today. I'm actually staying at my girlfriend's, so apologies for the lower quality, but I really want to get you guys a couple videos here, a pair of videos. And this pair of videos is how to design drums. Now, this is not specifically how to synthesize drums, which is, I guess, what I would actually classify as creating your own drums. So I guess this is more of two different sample layering techniques or sample combination techniques. So this isn't creating drums from scratch, this is creating drums from other drums. So I don't know if it's technically what I would call pure drum creation. That would be more on the synthesis side of things, but I actually prefer the results of this. I find I can get better results and just get better drums for my own music. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Before we get started, I do want to say one thing too. My new track, Whip It, is out now, and I'm going to link it in the description of this video. So even just supporting a new track when it comes out, helps tremendously. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first technique we're going to be taking a look at is one known as topping and tailing. I don't know where this started from, but I remember seeing this back on YouTube years and years ago, and I've been pretty much doing it ever since. And the concept of topping and tailing is to take the beginning and end, or beginning, middle, and end of 2 to 3 different drums and combining them to create a new drum. I find this is most effective with kicks and snares, but can theoretically be done to anything. So what does this look like? So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go through my drum library and I'm going to find a kick drum that I like the initial transient of. So I quite like this one. I like the punch on it, and all I'm doing is I'm dragging it in and I'm shortening it down to just a single click. See how after this initial transient, the initial impact of the sound, we have this low end information. I don't want this low end information because this is going to be coming from another drum. I'm literally using this for the initial click pretty much. Excellent. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through my drums and I'm going to be looking for something with a nice body. So this is kind of the middle of the drum. I quite like that one. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing it in, and from here I'm going to be cutting and fading it in sort of like a crossfade. Now there's one thing you want to be careful with this is there is a little bit of crossover between the two elements, as you can see here as this one's fading out in volume, and I could do it a little quicker, but as this one's fading out in volume, this one's coming, this one here is coming in volume, and you need to be very careful of the phase of the drums. So as you can see, this one's got a nice kind of upward peak right here, so it's pushing the speaker outward, and here it's actually, as you can see, pushing the speaker downward, so there might be some cancellation here that we don't want. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to nudge this over so they start to come in at the same time. As you can see, I've aligned these, and then from here I'm going to fade it in quite cleanly. So there we go, we've got that, and from here all I'm doing is kind of getting the characterful middle of the drum. I don't want the tail of this one. Where you're going to be chopping this is kind of to taste, so I'm just going to test things out. So maybe we can get a little bit more. I like that. And then similarly, I'm going to go through my library and I'm going to find one where I really like the tail. I like this one here. So same thing, you drop it in, you shorten it so you don't have kind of the beginning you don't need, and you fade it in as you phase align. Now, these two drums are very different pitches, which can create a bit of a problem with topping and tailing. As you can see, this one got really low frequency at the end and started a little higher, and the way it pitched down isn't quite the same as this one. So you have a few options. You can either change the pitch of the tail with warp off. So see here, I have warp off, and as I transpose, it'll actually kind of compress and expand the waveform. So you can see this actually aligned it, but now we're 9 semitones up. That might not sound very good. So let's just test it out. Let's see how it sounds. I'm gonna guess pretty bad. Yeah, a little too high. So let's just try out a different tail. Kind of like this for the concept of this drum. So same thing, I'm going to try and align it, and actually it aligns nicely at the very end. So this is kind of good. We can cut it and just have it come in as this one's fading out. So here you can see the phases aligned pretty nicely. This is going down, coming up, coming up. So things are kind of phase aligned there, so we won't get any cancellation. There, it works. Cut anything we don't need, trim the fat. And there we go, that's how you would do that. So we combined all those to get a new kick drum. I'm going to show you the same thing with a snare as well, just to really kind of solidify in your head how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my snare library, and I'm finding one with, you know, the kind of transient I want. It's really good to either use a reference drum, so a drum you kind of want to sound like, or have an idea of what you want before you start, because otherwise you might be combining weird drums that don't really work together. So in this case, I'm going to go for kind of a really punchy sort of dubstep or glitch hop style snare. That one's got a pretty nice crack to the front of it, and I'm really only listening to the front. I think I like this one a little bit more. So the nice thing about snares is you can be a little looser as to where things kind of fade in and out. But for this type of snare, there still is quite a bit of tone. So you just have to be kind of careful with how you're phase aligning and fading in and out with these different layers. So that's going to be my transient. Now I'm going to find a snare that takes on the body. So the body with the snare is actually more along the lines of where the tone is, while with the kick it's more in the tail, because that's where you have the long sub. With the snare it's in the middle, because usually the tail of a snare is more kind of white noisy and actually doesn't matter as much. So this middle section is where the snare gets a lot of its character and tone. So these seem to be a bit more clappy, and this is what I mean. It's good for me to know what kind of snare I'm building beforehand, because I know that these aren't really going to fill the role. These ones do, for sure. I really like the tone in number 2. Nine and 2. They're not quite the same. I was going to say, it sounds like I made them out of the same pack. So I'm actually going to go for number 9 here. So I'm going to fade this in. You can see I've clipped this quite heavily, so I'm going to go weak on the processing. But notice that things are completely phase opposite right now. This is going down, this is going up, this is going up, this is going down. So things are not really aligned here. So we have two options. Either I can shove this way over, which might sound a little funky, or alternatively what I could do is I could actually take utility and I could grab the phase of the left and right channel, and I can invert both of them. So both of these are actually technically inverted right now. So although we aren't visibly seeing that, if I were to, for example, freeze and flatten this, you would see it would do a nice little flip. So I could have done either, and I think I'm actually going to go with this one. I'm going to just phase flip it. Yeah, I quite like that. So now I don't want this tail of this snare. I just wanted that nice tonal middle. Maybe a little more. And this is where we can get a bit more liberal with the crossover compared to the kick drum, because things kind of turn into noise over time. See here, it's getting a little noisy at the end, so maybe something like that. Now I'll go back to my drums, and I'm going to find a new snare that will take on the role of the tail. Let's try a different pack. I don't hate this one. I'm going to drag it in. Maybe we'll try it. I like this one as well. So I'm going to test both of them out and see how they work. So this one here, I'm going to see how important the phase is. We do have some kind of essentially a different pitch, which might create some problems. So let's only start fading this one in as this one starts fading out, essentially doing a crossfade. And we definitely have some differences in the pitch. This one up here is much higher in pitch. So let's see how weird it sounds. We may need to pitch this down. Yeah, they're not very cohesive. Let's try pitching this one down and see if we can align things a little better here. So maybe something like this. If this was one semitone lower or a few cents lower, things would be kind of lined up, as you can see, relatively close. There's obviously some discrepancies, but maybe we won't have such a long tail since we're kind of turning this into our own. So that works. It's not perfect, but it does work. And then let's try the other tail just in case I prefer that one. Similarly, I'm always kind of careful about the phase. So this one's actually a lower pitch than the other one. So if we transpose with the warp function off, you can see things start to compress. That seems much closer in pitch. Let's line things up as best we can. You can see it kind of turns into noise as this fades out. There may be a little cancellation at times, but the other one's so low in volume at that point, it might not be too big an issue. So let's see what it sounds like. Yeah, I wouldn't say this one works. It sounds like it's from a different source, but I did like how these work. So from here, there's one kind of final step I recommend doing, and it's simply resampling this snare down to see how the volumes faded, to see if things are consistent and whether we need to change volumes, change the fades, or process. So I'm going to do a little record here. Yeah, and you can see there is a little bit of a problem where as this one fades out and this one fades in, we had a bit of a volume duck here, but then once this one reached peak volume, it was louder than it was in the middle. So as these two are fading in, there must be a bit of a volume duck. So what we can do is we can kind of bump their volumes a little bit and see how those work. And if not, we may need to compress or something like that. There we go. Look at that. That's a perfectly consistent shape where it starts big and it shrinks in volume. So that's kind of the one reason I want to resample that down, is to take a peek. And if we zoom out, yeah, that's a nice looking snare there. So that's it really. That's how I would top and tail to create drums. I know I didn't really show you guys how to process this. There are steps I would do to process that, but I'm actually going to save that for part 2 of this video, where I show you how I make drums through a technique that I started doing on my own. For all I know, other people do this, but it's a technique I started on my own called multi-band drum design, and I'll show you what that is. in the next video. So I hope you guys got a lot out of this. Again, my new track Whip It is out if you guys want to check that out and support it. And I'll see you guys in part 2 of this tutorial series. Thanks guys. Peace.